you. There we go.
All right. Hello, my name is Omer Usmani. Some of you in the audience may have worked with me in the past. I am one of the security analysts at the CCC Tech Center. So to begin with this presentation, we do have to start off with a disclaimer. Social engineering can lend itself to malicious and generally illegal activity. The information we will go through today is for educational purposes, specifically to help with the efforts that could lead to prevention or mitigation. So we will be going over the common methods of social engineering, best ways to prevent falling victim to it, and finally discussing some infamous and well-known social engineers. So to give a definition of social engineering, I'm going to quote Christopher Hadnagy, who has an excellent book on this topic, and from where I draw much of his presentation material from. So he defines social engineering as any act that influences a person to take an action that may or may not be in his or her best interest. So this is usually performed to acquire confidential information that ultimately leads to a financial incentive or gain for the social engineer. Examples of information that are stolen with social engineering attacks include credit card information, bank account information, social security numbers, email addresses, and user password combinations, or any other personally identifying information. So user password combinations can be leveraged to gain access into targeted organizations' network, and it could ultimately lead to a ransomware attack. So there are 4 types of social engineering techniques that we will discuss. I will attempt to walk through the workflow of each and provide recommendations to avoid becoming a victim of a discussed tactic. So the first one is something a lot of people are already familiar with, and that's phishing, where we deal with those fraudulent email messages. The second is SMSing. So this stands for SMS phishing. This is essentially similar to phishing, but targets phone numbers and uses text messages rather than emails. Oh, so it looks like I have the order wrong here, but the third one will be phishing, also known as voice phishing. This is where the social engineer sets up a fraudulent phone call to extract information from the individual who answers the call. And finally, the fourth is impersonation. This is where a social engineer takes the role or persona of another individual and tries to gain physical access to some building or some room in a building. So a social engineering attack usually has a workflow of 5 steps. So that's OSINT, or open source intelligence. There is pretext development, the attack plan, attack launch, and finally reporting. So OSINT is an acronym for open source intelligence, and a social engineer likely spends most of their time on this in the entire workflow. So the Office of the Director of National Intelligence defines OSINT as any intelligence produced from publicly available information that is collected, exploited, and disseminated in a timely manner to an appropriate audience for the purpose of addressing a specific intelligence requirement. So the sources of information that could make this intelligence can be pulled from any publicly available information. So there is no strictly defined methodology or sources of information to choose from. With that in mind, sources can range from media pieces such as newspapers, television, and social media, for example, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn for professional information. So you could also find information directly from IT resources such as Linux servers that are open to the internet, Jira pages, GitHub pages that contain source code for an application, log files, and a lot more. So in terms of social engineering, these are some questions that someone conducting OSINT can ask. So there are a lot of questions to go through, but you should just note that a social engineer can craft the questions or research based on the type of target, whether it's an organization, or a corporation that they want to obtain information from. So there are different tools or methods an attacker could use to conduct OSINT. There is a simple who is lookup command where they can find information related to the target organization's domain or registrar. So that would look something like this. There is also a tool called Shodan, but this is mostly for finding out information related to networking, such as ports that are left open to the internet belonging to a specific domain or IP address. So a social engineer is most likely going to use Google dorking to obtain information on a specific target. So sorry about that. It seems like my slides are out of order. So Google dorking is basically you're basically using the Google search engine to look for information that's available to the public. So these are the common operators you could use in Google search. So a social engineer is most likely use all in text, all in URL, and site. So all in text searches for a specific text that's contained on a web page. All in URL is used to find various keywords in a URL. And then site is just looking at specific websites for a Google search term. So there is a lot more when it comes to Google dorking and open source intelligence, and it is really its own topic that requires its own presentation. So I did present on this last summer, and I may do so again for the next workshop. So the next step is pretexting. So pretexting is defined as the practice of presenting oneself as someone else. Basically, the social engineer creates a whole new identity and then uses that identity to manipulate individuals that are being targeted at an organization. So generally, pretexting is used to impersonate people in certain jobs and roles that they themselves, the social engineer, has never done. And this persona is built off of the previously conducted open source intelligence research. So there are 6 principles that a social engineer uses to develop the pretext for the, so these talk more from the perspective of the social engineer. So the first one is thinking through your goals. Again, from the social engineer's perspective. They rely on information conducted from OSINT results. The social engineer builds a persona based off of their research. For example, they could attempt to use a phishing domain that looks similar to a target domain of an organization. They could impersonate an individual in the target organization based on role. So for example, if a target is, let's say, a CEO or CTO, and they've done speeches or released any form of personal writing to the public, the social engineer can study those and then use those to mimic their own writing style in phishing emails, or use their similar tone in a voice phishing attack. So second, we have understanding reality versus fiction. So what this essentially is not looking for information that goes outside the role that the attacker wants to imitate. For example, a support engineer would not ask questions related to, let's say, maybe financial aid or health insurance. So that would be kind of a reach. Third, we have knowing how far to go. So this is asking only for information that the target set of users have access to. So this kind of goes hand in hand with the previous example. So asking for too much or for something the user does not have access to will likely go ignored. Fourth, we have avoiding short-term memory loss. So if the social engineer is deep in the engagement and they've successfully have gotten hold of some employees in an organization, they've already started conversations with them. They should do their best they can to remember the role they're impersonating and not slip up. So fifth, we have getting support for pretexting. after establishing themselves as a trusted agent, the social engineer tricks employees into giving them access to something that's highly privileged, let's say passwords or access to some important documents that may have PII on them. 6 is executing the pretext. So this is following through with impersonation. For example, responding to a reply to a spear phishing email. So we'll talk about spear phishing later. So after pretext, we have the attack plan. So this is the next step that the social engineer would take. So they would ask the 3 W's, what, when, and who. So they would ask, what is the plan? What is it that we're going for and trying to achieve? What does the client want? And these questions help develop the next piece of the attack. They would also ask, when is the best time to launch the attack, and who needs to be available at the moment for support or assistance? So next, there's launching attack. So that's kind of self-explanatory. They basically conduct the attack, and then once they're done, they report their findings. Once, and if they were successful, they would log any PII and then use that further to breach an organization or just go out and expose it to the public. Sorry about that. So the first tactic we will go over is phishing. So phishing originated with the rise of the internet in the mid-1990s, and it is considered one of the oldest tricks in the social engineers playbook. Yeah, it is still effective till this day. So according to this, sorry about that. According to this image from the latest Verizon data breach and investigations report, phishing still lends itself to about 80% of the attacks involving social engineering. Basically, the attacker impersonates a trusted entity or organization and then tricks the end user into opening a malicious link or attachment via email. So the result of a successful phish depends on the scope of the target. So if it is a single individual targeted, the stolen information usually includes financial information, resulting in unauthorized purchases or identity theft. So if the target is a government or corporation, the phishing can ultimately be used to install malicious software to a host computer and eventually get a foothold on the organization's network. So more often than not, this is a precursor to ransomware where critical assets are locked up until a payment is made to the attacker or the attacking group. So some of the severe consequences of being phished, again, installation of malicious software, precursor to ransomware, there's financial loss to the organization, and if information is leaked and customer information is compromised, consumers would lose trust in that company or organization. So there are 3 types of phishing tactics we'll discuss here. So the first one is deceptive phishing, the second is spear phishing, and the third is whaling. So the first is deceptive phishing, which is the most common type of phishing scam. So here the attacker will impersonate a legitimate company in an attempt to steal an individual's personal information or login credentials. So the email itself looks like it originated from a valid source, and it often implies a sense of urgent action needed. So in a deceptive phish, there's 4 techniques the attacker could utilize. So they could use legitimate links. So here the attacker includes legitimate URL links or target organization's contact information to evade detection from spam filters within the email itself. Second is the use of company logos and themes. So there are extensions that are used by web developers to identify fonts and themes on a specific web page. And these tools could be used by a social engineer as well who want to impersonate the target organization. So basically, they could attempt to utilize a similar theme of an organization and use that theme in the phishing email to give the victim a false sense of familiarity with the email and make it look more authentic. So third, we have the copying of the landing and login page. So basically, the attacker will skim the website they want to obtain credentials from, and they could also add malicious code or have it download malicious documents that are installed into the victim's device. So fourth is the use of shortened URLs and redirects. So in order to prevent suspicion on the part of the end user, the attacker can shorten the target URL, and they could also redirect to the legitimate website of the target organization once they've logged in and submitted their credentials. Right, so next we have spear phishing. So this type is more catered to targeting a specific individual. So the email in this case is customized to include the target's name, company, position, work phone number, and information that helps the attacker trick the recipient into thinking that the sender has some sort of connection with them. So as with deceptive phishing, the goal here is the same. The attacker wants a target to download a malicious attachment or click a malicious URL with the end goal of obtaining personal and valuable information. Social media and networking sites such as LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter are commonly used to gather this information about the target individual in order to craft the phishing email that will be sent out. So finally, we have whaling. So this essentially uses the same methods as spear phishing, except in this case, the attacker wants to target the company executive or higher up at an organization. And the reason for this is because executives often have admin privileges or root privileges over organization systems. So the attacker would have a better chance of infiltrating their network, and they would have an easier time deploying ransomware across the critical systems. So the attacker could also get in the organization supply chain with this technique. All right, so how to avoid getting phished. So these are some of the guidelines to follow. So you always want to keep in mind, does the email sent directly relate to the matter I'm involved in? And you want to be wary of emails that imply a sense of urgency, especially if they regard passwords or account information. So some common phrases are change password immediately, your mailbox is out of space, there is a problem with your credit card information, or we have migrated to a new, let's say, service, click here to access. So this is an example of a phishing email. It's a very rudimentary example, but you could see this email implies a sense of urgency. If the student or employee has a risk of losing access to their account, they are more likely to click the link into the diff7 website where either a malicious document is downloaded or likely in this case, they're capturing credentials. So another way to check for phishing is to examine the URL. So if the domain does not match the organization it is claiming to be, then it's likely a deceptive website that's attempting to steal information from you. So you can see here, they got rid of the .edu domain and they used .edurenewal.com instead of the slash. So again, there's more checks you could do for the web pages. Obviously, you want to, as we talked about before, you want to make sure the URL is correct. You want to make sure there's a SSL cert on the website. So it is a big giveaway if there is no SSL cert. But usually a good social engineer would download a valid SSL cert and upload that to the phishing website. So you do want to click into it and see, who the certificate authority is. So often attackers use some place that's easy to obtain certs. So Let's Encrypt would be, I guess that would be one of the more popular ones amongst certificate authorities attackers use. So again, for let's say California Community College websites, generally those are all the certificates are usually backed by InCommon. All right, so next we have phishing. So as mentioned earlier, phishing is similar to phishing, except the attacker uses a phone call as a means to extract personal information instead of an email. So this could also be achieved with a robocall as well, without the need for someone talking on the calling end. So we will go over the three of the popular techniques used to establish trust with the target in a phishing scam. So the first one is ID spoofing. This is where an attacker masks their phone number to make the call look like it originated from a valid phone number in the target's area code. So what this does is give the target a false sense of security that the call is legitimate. They could also spoof the phone number itself and make it look exactly like the target's phone number based on who they want to impersonate. Second is corporate jargon. So after an attacker gains intel on a spoofed organization that they want to mimic, they will communicate to the target using vocabulary or terminology that belongs to that organization. So an example of this can be impersonating in-house tech support by using technical terms and referencing things like, let's say, service or networking issues. So the third is mumbling answers. So this is not as effective as a tactic as the first two. So this is where attacker mumbles responses to a question in hopes of giving something sufficient and trying not to give themselves away either. So as with phishing emails, phishing calls also take advantage of a victim by making urgent requests. So common themes of phishing targets include compromised bank or credit card accounts, call from the IRS, investment offers, scams that involve government services, so Medicare and Social Security are two, and then scams that involve student loans and scholarships are also pretty common. So I do have a video I want to show that goes through a phishing attack. So see if
DEFCON.
Are you able to hear it?
We can hear it.
DEFCON is the biggest hacker convention.
I'll just
Convention of the year. It's a place where thousands of hackers come to hear talks to demonstrate their newest hacks. It's actually a place that's so dangerous to be on the internet that they tell you to turn off the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth on your phone. And they tell you not to use the ATMs too, because those could be hacked as well. This is the DEFCON ballroom. It's sort of the main room where things are happening. And it's pretty wild. I think this is car hacking village. This car's locked. Can you get me in? I'll unlock it for you. Should be good. Hacking is no longer like this fringe activity. And if you are at DEF CON, there's a good chance that you're here because you want to learn what could happen to you or your company.
Anyone here first time in the SCCTF?
I invited Chris to hack me with his team, but they're going to hack me using social engineering, which is essentially hacking without any code. They just use a phone and an internet connection.
We help people with human security issues by testing vulnerabilities for like a network test, but it's for the people network. We test those vulnerabilities, see where the holes are, and then help people learn so they can patch them.
Can we try some of this? Can we try some?
Yeah,
see if it works.
Yeah, we probably could have our star visher here make some phone calls as
Let's do it.
Sure. You want to do a sample phishing call?
What's phishing?
Phishing is voice solicitation. And basically what you do is you use the phone to extract information or data points that can be used in a later attack.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Who are you going to call?
Maybe I'll call your cell phone provider
Okay.
and see if I can get them to give me your email address.
I bet they're good. I bet they have my back. But yeah, go for it.
I'm going to spoof from your number. So it's going to look like it's calling from you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me okay? My baby, I'm sorry. My husband's like, we're about to apply for a loan and we just had a baby and he's like, get this done by today. So I'm so sorry. I can't call you back. I'm trying to log into our account for uses information and I can't remember what email address we used to log the account. The baby's crying and can you help me? Awesome.
In just 30 seconds,
Gmail.com.
Jessica gets my personal email address.
Now, if I needed to add our older daughter on our account so she could call in and make changes, how would I need to go about doing that? You would have to send me a secure PIN through a text message? Yeah, well, the thing is, I don't think I'll be able to receive a text message if I'm on the phone. Shh. Oh, I'm not on there either? So I thought when we got married, he added me to the account. Okay, my
Jessica
name
uses my girlfriend's name and a fake social security number
is 5127.
to set up her own personal access to my account.
Wait, I'm sorry. So there's no password on my account right now? Can I set that up?
She even gets the support person to change my
Thank
password.
you so much for your help today.
So she just basically blocked me out of my own account.
I'll get her fed after this. All right, thank you.
Holy shit. So they just gave you access to my entire cell phone
You're
account.
gonna have to go on and change your password now because it's Jess, my name.
And all it took was a crying baby and a phone call.
Yes.
I really thought that my cell phone company would protect me. I mean, like, this is the most basic stuff, and they're not doing it. And if they're not doing it, you know, all these other businesses aren't doing it either. Anyone with a phone and an internet connection can do social engineering. But I was curious, what can a hacker with serious coding skills do?
Well, DEF CON is the world's biggest hacking convention. It's hacking everything, hacking social, hacking hardware, hacking software, hacking various systems.
I asked Dan Tentler, a well-known security researcher, to turn all of his firepower on me.
I did get into quite a number of things that I found.
So what were the first things you did? How did you start hacking me?
I quickly found your Squarespace blog and had an idea. Basically, what I did was created a bogus Squarespace site and sent an email to you, a phish asking you to go to this website, run the certificate installer.
And I did it because
Yeah.
I'm an idiot.
So once you ran that, it gave me access to your computer, and I created several fake pop-ups that looked like system pop-ups that would ask you for your credentials.
You didn't even have to have my passwords.
So you gave them to me.
I gave them to you.
Yeah. So I stole your 1Password keychain.
And 1Password is where I store all my other passwords. So effectively
And
by
your social security number and your Amex stuff and all your stock trading and bank information. I can send email to everyone in this room as you. I am you right now, if I wanted to be. If my evilness is working correctly, it should actually be taking pictures of your desktop and pictures through your webcam every 2 minutes. And I have been watching you for about 2 days now. In
Oh my
coffee
God.
shops, at your mom's house, on a plane. Here's your editing stuff. There's you.
oh my God,
looking
so this
nervous.
is literally
every 2 minutes.
through my webcam.
Yeah, through this guy.
How badly could you have messed up my life?
I could have made you homeless. I could have made you homeless and penniless.
How?
Like-
How would you make me homeless?
Like, I have control of your digital life in its entirety. I have all your credentials. I have all your access to all your financial information, all your work information, all your personal information. I can pay people with your bank account or your Amex account. I am you. I can fully impersonate. Like, the only thing I couldn't doctor would be like your fingerprints.
This is like as bad as it gets.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's bad.
So it turns out that Dan Tentler is very good at his job. I mean, he hacked the hell out of me. He got everything. I mean, frankly, I want to take my computer and throw it into the deepest part of the ocean, and I want to become a hermit, and I want to never touch a piece of technology again, because holy shit, that was everything. That was the keys to my entire life, and he just pulled them out of his pocket.
All right, let me bring my slides back up. Okay, so in order to prevent this from happening to you, so obviously you don't want to take calls from unknown phone numbers and never give out personal information over the phone. And this is something that also pertains to employees of an organization. And you could try to register with the National Do Not Call Registry to avoid any type of spam or robocalls, but a lot of people report that it's not very effective. So if you notice in the video, he got the password to his OnePass, so that's a password manager. So another preventive measure you could take is enable two-factor on that, and also enable two-factor on any important accounts. So banking, financial, email, brokerage, things like that. So a recent example of a phishing attack. So this one took place last November on the online trading platform Robinhood. So the attacker was on the phone with a customer support employee for an entire hour. And by the end of the call, the attacker had keys to information on 7 million customers. So no accounts were compromised in this, and the information obtained were mostly email addresses. But this is the biggest breach for brokerage based on the total number of users whose emails were exposed. So the next technique we will go on over is smishing. So this is short for SMS phishing. So smishing uses malicious text messages to fool a target into clicking a URL where personal information is captured or malware is downloaded onto the device. So there are three primary techniques used by an attacker using SMSing. So the first is the download of a malicious app. So this is where the attacker sends a malicious link in a text message. And if the user opens it, a malicious app begins to install in the background. So those apps could then deploy ransomware or enable other nefarious actors to remotely control their device. The second is linked to data stealing forms. So in this scenario, the attacker could use a text message along with deceptive phishing techniques to fool targets into clicking their malicious link. So that link takes the target to a website designed to steal their personal information. Again, a credential harvesting website. And the third is to instruct the user to contact tech support. So this is kind of hand in hand with phishing. So with this phishing tactic, the actor in this case sends out text messages that instruct the target recipient to contact a number for customer support. So that number would actually go to the scammer, and the scammer will then impersonate a legitimate customer service representative and attempt to trick the victim to handing over their personal data. So this is a common example of a smishing message. So saying there's sorry about that. It's saying there's a alert from American Express. Somebody's using their credit card, and you have to go to this link to solve the issue. So how do you defend against this? Well, we look for similar signs as we do with phishing attempts. So first, you want to check for spelling and grammar mistakes in the message. Second, you want to visit the company's website itself to perform the required action instead of clicking the link or providing information in the message. So as with the previous example, instead of clicking this link, you would just go to the American Express website directly, log into your account and see if your card has actually been used somewhere else and you have some fraudulent payment. So third is to verify the sender's telephone number with the one that's listed on the company's website. Fourth is to not open links from unknown senders. So if the phone number itself is unknown and it doesn't have a caller ID, usually in this one wouldn't apply to an online service per se, but it would apply to, let's say, an individual who's trying to impersonate someone else. So fifth, we have you have to be wary of keywords such as affect or sign up now, or anything that seems too good to be true, or anything that's implying a sense of urgency on your end. Also, another thing you could do is if the company has a service, if the company or service has an app, so let's say it's FedEx or UPS, you can set up app-based notifications for your delivery instead of relying on text messages. Or this could also apply to credit cards, like the previous example. All right, so here's an example of a recent smishing campaign. So this one is known as tangobot. So this uses a COVID-themed alert to convince users to click a link, which leads to deceptive website where sensitive information is collected from the victim who clicks the link. So in this case, the information submitted was used to commit unemployment insurance fraud. So the last social engineering tactic we will go over is physical impersonation of an employee. So generally, an impersonator will take the identity of an employee from a trusted vendor, contractor, or person of authority. So they also usually take on the role of a delivery person or technical support engineer in order to gain physical access into a building. So to prevent impersonation attacks, this applies more towards organizations, but employees should be aware of individuals belonging to other vendors or contractors. There should be proper identification controls that are in place before letting anybody who claims to be an external vendor onto the site. Right, so now we're going to go over some famous social engineers. So the first one is probably the most well-known social engineer, Kevin Mitnick. His past attacks include breaching various Fortune 500 companies, as well as federal and state agencies. So he primarily utilized phishing and physical impersonation, and he knew the vulnerabilities of everyday systems that date back to 1975. So these are like punch card systems, telephone systems, and intercom systems. So basically, by knowing how these things work, he was able to impersonate other people and change his voice, stuff like that. Another thing he did was ride the LA Metro bus network for free by hacking into their payment systems. So he was eventually charged with 18 counts of fraud and 8 cases of unauthorized entry. So he eventually became a social engineering consultant, and he teaches clients how to protect themselves against people who did things like himself. So he has published 3 successful books. So these are some rather popular books on social engineering as well. All right, so next we have Frank William Abagnale. So this social engineer was active during the 1960s. And so this was without the assistance of the internet or other digital conveniences that we have today that are primarily used to carry out attacks. So Abigail portrayed himself as a variety of imposters, and he used techniques that would build confidence with his victims. So he combined those talents with his forgery skills, and he pulled off some of the most deceptive scams of all time. So everything from impersonating a resident pediatrician at a hospital for almost a year to also posing as an airline pilot to fly for free. So while he uses knowledge and expertise for purposes of deceit, he later got caught and served time. So after he served his time, he eventually became a security consultant and helped the FBI thwart similar type of crimes that he would commit. So his life was depicted in a 2002 film called Catch Me If You Can. All right, so last we have Charles Ponzi. So everyone knows about the Ponzi scheme. So, and this is basically where a popular example of social engineering started. So the Ponzi scheme was basically mail fraud with coupons where people sold them for stamps. So what Ponzi did was send money to agents working for him in other countries. They would buy the coupons and send them back home to the United States. So he would then exchange the coupons for stamps that were actually worth more than what he originally paid for. And he would later go on and sell the stamps at a higher price. So he eventually was caught in August 1920 when the Boston Post newspaper started to investigate his returns. This basically set off an audit of his company, and he was later charged with 86 counts of mail fraud. He pleaded guilty and spent 14 years in prison. So he allegedly made more than 400% return on some of his sales from those stamps. Oh, so I'm actually almost done. There's a lot of time left over. So lastly, I'll go over some resources where you can find out what information is publicly available on you as yourself, or you could check it on behalf of your organization. So the first one is Have I Been Pwned? So this is basically a database that has a collection of leaked accounts that have been compromised through various data breaches that have occurred in the past. So Have I Been Pwned allows visitors to input their email address or password to see where and when they've been breached, or if the password has already been compromised. So basically in that case, it's already been used. It's already been leaked in a previous data breach. And in that case, if you do use same passwords for different services, it's advised to change them. So this one is pretty straightforward to use. So I don't think I should go over this one. So next one is Intelligence X. So it's an open source information gathering search engine tool. So this one is different from other search engines as it generates searches for specific targets in terms such as URLs, email addresses, and more. So it also has a service of searching for Bitcoin addresses. So the searches are explored through the darknet as well as the surface web, and a copy of the results from searches are stored in a historical data archive. So basically with this one, so I'm going to use a throwaway email of mine that I haven't used in years. But you could search for your email address and it'll give you raw data on where your email was leaked and if your password was leaked as well. So the next one is dehashed. So this one's kind of similar to Intelligence X. It gives you raw data. So there are more features with this. So this one has monitoring, and I believe this is free. So you could actually monitor your email accounts and see if they've been involved in data breach. And if so, you could quickly change your passwords on those. So the next one is Spiderfoot. So this is another popular open source intelligence tool. So this is used to gather information on IP addresses, domain names, email addresses, names, and a lot of more things. So in this one, you could, let's see what I have here. Yeah, okay. So you could specify the target you want to investigate and then select which modules to enable. So these are basically what you want to look for. So by default, everything is enabled. And basically this will collect data and build up an understanding of all the entities and where your data is found, where your email is found, let's say, and how they relate to each other. So you could run scans on your own email addresses or domains, and you can get an idea on where on the internet this information is found. And if it's in the hands of a malicious actor or some company you do not recognize, you could quickly change your credentials for those or just close their accounts. So there was an example here. Sample scan. So let's see. Okay. So in this case, in this example, they specified a name, a full name, and then an email address. And once the scan is complete, basically you get different types of results, and the easiest one to find is data type. So you look up different types of accounts that are on different websites. So you can see where your email address has been used. And if you don't recognize it, you could remove your account, change your password, all that type of stuff. So you could also see, where on social media your email account is being used. So this could be a good way to find out, if somebody's impersonating you or not. All right. So the next resources pertain to phishing. So there are different websites where you could check to see if you're skeptical about a URL you're sent to, you could actually run it through one of these tools and see if it's been connected to phishing attacks in the past. So I'm not sure about the reputation of these two. I have used it in the past and it was able to detect phishing URLs, but sorry. The more reliable ones are Virus Total, where you can scan a URL and it will check if it's malicious or not. You could also upload files and see if the file itself is malicious or not. So that's pretty cool. And the other one is transparencyreport.google.com. So again, I forgot where it was, but you could specify a URL and check to see if it's connected to any phishing related servers or if it's used in phishing in the past. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Omer, for your presentation. The next talk is about log aggregation Splunk. Our next presenter